The second question I get a lot is, what do you think is the greatest difference in your experience as a traditional Wiccan and mine as, and sometimes the as is a solitary practitioner, someone newly exploring the path, someone blending this path with another, someone even in circle who's in an eclectic circle who's wondering what might be the greatest differences. And I'm going to propose they are not so great as we might think. That folks like myself who came from a very prescribed way are learning that if we look at another with respect and with love, we can honor the fact that we are in similar and sometimes identical places in experience. Folks like me from traditional backgrounds need to loosen up and be able to see that in others. And it works the other way. Those of us not in traditional experiences need to know that we actually have a lot more in common than we think we might with someone from a traditional path. That's my take on that. That if we don't trip over ourselves, we find out we have a lot in common. I thought about this because I've gotten the question so often recently, what do I think is the biggest difference between trad Wiccans and those following a non-traditional path? And I kept thinking of all the things we have in common. And there's one thing that keeps coming up as the thing I think is our greatest difference. Doesn't make it the way or a right way, but it is a large difference in lots of instances, if not most of the instances where I've had open conversations with non-traditionalists. And that is the traditional relationship to the elements, the elementals, and elemental guardians. A great part of our training before initiation has to do with developing a relationship, an intimate, knowing relationship with the elements and the elementals. It's where we learn to do our magic. It's where our power, what comes within us, it's how we bring it out into the world, how we manifest it is by calling forth partnership with an element or a couple of elements and making things happen. And the relationship with elemental guardians is not something I'm seeing as part of the solitary eclectic experiences. In fact, most aren't familiar with what a guardian is as a traditional Wiccan looks at them. Our partner who stands with us, guides the energy that we create on behalf of the element they represent, and keeps it in right relationship to Goddess. Not a philosophy that I see shared with non-traditionalists. We will have in common honoring the spirit of the elements. We will have in common connection to the natural world and the elements as they exist there. But this relationship to the elementals and to elemental guardians is something that, it's no big secret. There certainly are books that have mentioned it, but it is a great part of elemental study, and elemental balancing is a very important part of the educational process, the formal process for a trad Wiccan. And it's a great, great part of who I am spiritually and how I do what I do and how my magic comes out of me and what I partner with to make it happen. And I don't see it a lot in the more book-learned, individualistic Wiccans who are experiencing this path solitary or in groups of learning and growing together in a very free-form way. It's actually a rather huge thing because it is such an important part of traditional Wicca. And if we were chatting and you were thinking, well, we have that in common, then I would say, then explain to me all the powers of water. Explain to me what your relationship is to water, how water moves through you, how water creates, how water destructs, and tell me how your water guardian watches over what you do and aligns with you in the work that you do. And then we would see that perhaps we come at this a different way. No right or wrong. There's never any right or wrong in a spiritual path of exploration. But when the question was, what are the biggest differences you see? Actually, that is, to me, the largest difference. And it interweaves into the other question of what do I do in a day's time? Because as I move through the day, I am intentionally aligned at different times with the elements. As I move through the year, each element has its quarter to which I am devoted to that element. Elemental balancing and the experience of it is not something I've seen often outside of traditional Wicca. So I thought I'd answer those two questions so that I could continue the dialogue with those of you I am corresponding privately with on these two topics, and also to put it out there for consideration for others who might find our conversations interesting. As always, I wish you mirth and reverence. Merry part.